Hello again, and welcome to another episode. We are still joined by the lovely Ali, and we're talking about a bit of a different book now.
Yes, we are. We've got In the Vanishers Palace by apologies for any of my pronunciations that are going to be terrible
Yes,
because I'm
on
just
all
not great.
levels.
I'm that classic kid who was like, you only learn words from reading them, not hearing them. So I
Yes.
always say them wrong. I'm not great. Aliette De Bodard, and I'm going to read a little bit of, I think I'm going to read the whole blurb because it's not a terribly long one. So, in a ruined, devastated world where the earth is poisoned and beings of nightmares roam the land, a woman betrayed, terrified, sold into indenture to pay her villagers' debts, and struggling to survive in a spirit world. A dragon among the last of her kind, cold and aloof, but desperately trying to make a difference. When failed scholar Yen is sold to Wukong, one of the last dragons walking the earth, she expects to be tortured or killed for Wukong's amusement. But Wukong, it turns out, has a use for Yen. She needs a scholar to tutor her two unruly children. She takes Yen back to her home, a vast, vertiginous. I think I
Vertiginous,
said
yep,
that right.
Good
beautifully
job.
done.
Jesus Christ, I don't think I've ever said that word out loud. Palace prison, where every door can lead to death. Bukon seems stern and unbending, but as the days pass, Yen comes to see her kinder and caring side. She finds herself dangerously attracted to the dragon, who is her master and jailer. In the end, Yen will have to decide where her own happiness lies, and whether it will survive the revelation of Vukon's dark, unspeakable secrets.
Mm.
So, as the blurb hints at, this is a kind of a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. So, Ali, what did you like about the particular way that it played with like this very classic romance story? It gets retold a lot, particularly in
Yeah,
fantasy
so I
romance.
really like, I specifically like how it deals with the captive captor dynamics. I
Hmm.
feel like Yen is given a lot more autonomy than most do in that dynamic.
Hmm.
And the way that she is valued for something other than a here you are, this is it. Like Wukong, yes, is going to keep her, but specifically because, oh, you have a brain. I need someone to, look after these children in a sort of loose sense of the
Yes.
word. Um, I think that's the thing I really like about that. I think it plays really interestingly with ideas of consent, and I mean, Dubodard writes in this really sort of beautiful prosaic style. It's very because you guys basically said which book do you want to pick, and I was like, oh my God, so many, so many.
Yeah.
Um, and rather than going for some of the classic sapphic romances that are out at the moment, I thought I'd go for this one because it is so very different in the
Hmm.
way that it engages with everything. Like everything is different in this book.
Yeah. I loved there was one particular moment where she first arrives at the palace and I did really appreciate her going, there's places you shouldn't go. And she's like, oh, you've forbidden me. And she's like, no, you're a human. I'm not going to forbid you because you're going to go straight there. And I loved that kind of wisdom
Yeah.
of instead of like every other Beauty and the Beast, no, you must not go to that wing. And then like, immediately that's where the character's going. It was just like this thing of it's not going to be smart for you to go in some places, you
Yeah.
know. It was like a respectful thing. This
Yes.
is you. This is what your brain's going to think of. I did enjoy that bit.
I was gonna say, yeah, I went into it and just as soon as you're there, it's like, okay, you're supposed to be beastly, but everybody else is so much more beastly as well. And it
Yeah.
kind of just,
Yeah.
yeah, which beast am I looking at? Because the one I'm supposed to be looking at, I'm enjoying a lot more.
And she does
So,
I
enjoy
know.
that.
yes, she does indeed.
Yes.
With this pick, it leans more into literary fiction than what we'd have on the podcast, or is sort of the vast majority of romancy we see out there. After chatting to you before about your own book, we know you know a load about this. So, do you think that there's more SSF kind of romances out there that lean this way that readers might not expect to see?
Yeah, I have a couple of titles.
Fire
There's
my
This Is
way.
How You Lose the Time War by
Oh,
Amal El Mahatar and Max Gladstone, which is like a time travel sapphic romance. Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki, and Winter's Orbit by Everina
oh,
Maxwell.
yeah.
And I
We
also
covered that
have,
one. We've
We
done that
have.
one on
She's
the
lovely. And I
podcast.
also
Yeah.
have, oh, God damn it. Wind, wait there. That angle. No. There you go.
We will
Whitworth
find
Doom.
it.
It's called Whitworth Doom Baby by Stephanie Simpson, which is kind of gothic fantasy. I love Steph. So she actually doesn't live too far from Jess in
We
the
were
wide
chatting about it in the
scheme of
boat,
things.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. Um, and usually she writes sort of erotic romance with a lot of disability rap. It's like really, really good stuff. But Whitworth Doom Baby is gorgeous and just lusciously almost. I get obsessed with the way that people write. Like there are some people who, when they write, I'm just like, I wish I had written this. And I feel like that every time I read an Aliette De Bodard book. I'm just like, the writing is just gorgeous. Like you lose it's almost overwhelming. You kind of lose yourself in it. So yeah, those three, This Is How You Lose the Time, or Light from Uncommon Stars. And I think Winter's Orbit is kind of similar in the sort of style, the sort of prosaic aspect of it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you said, I'm a nerd on these things. Like my PhD is on queerness, neurodiversity, and kink in romance, and how it forms citizenships and works as a counter public, so works in direct contrast to what we expect romance to do, which I find really interesting. So a lot of my favorites are ones that are like, let's do something different.
Yeah.
Although I will also just inject straight into my veins like fucking dark romance. I don't read anything.
I think that's the thing, like people seem like you get a lot of discourse in romance spaces about what a romance should be and what it's presenting and stuff, and the attitudes people have towards romance as well. And it's like it's not respected in the same way as other genres, in that there can be such difference in what you've got and all of it is valid. Just because you love to read a smutty romance novel doesn't mean you can't also appreciate something that is literary, or
Yeah.
there's so much there to be
And
had.
I think there's so much to be said as well for pop culture texts, like books that are read by the masses.
Mhm.
Like Shakespeare was not the literary god.
No.
Well, no, that's not true. Let's rephrase that because I did a master's in Shakespeare. Shakespeare is my dude. I love him, but he wasn't a literary figure in his day. He was
Yeah.
pop culture,
Yep.
and he is the one who survived. So I think when we think about these
Yeah.
things, romance, genre romance as an academic field is pretty new. Like people started writing about romance novels in the 80s, and it was in this really moralizing tone. So like Janice Radway talks about historical romances and keeps on talking about women using them as escapism. And Tanya Modlewski wrote Loving with a Vengeance, and she writes in that book there's a chapter on, I think she picks six Mills and Boon novels, and the number of times I've physically thrown that book across the room because I get really angry. But they're writing in the 80s, and they were the first people to write about contemporary genre romance that's not, Jane Austen, with any kind of seriousness. And now there's an academic journal, there's an association for the study of popular romance. And there's so much more out there, but it feels really young, whereas people have been writing about science fiction and crime and other genre fiction for years.
Yeah.
Um,
Why is
yeah,
there this assumption that there's more layered to these other genres than there
Yeah.
is in romance? There's still writers that are going,
exactly.
influenced by their surrounding, influenced by political landscapes and what they
And I
want to get out of the books that they're creating.
And I think there's something truly radical about romance in that it is focusing on joy, particularly when you have romances that are focusing on marginalized identities. Like, I never got to see growing up someone like me on TV.
Hmm.
There, the first Sapphic book I ever read was by Eden Bradley, and I was in my early 20s at university. And that was the first time I ever read a published book with Sapphic content in. And it
Mm.
brings me so much joy that now there's content like that for like teenagers and children.
Yeah.
Like it's so the publishing landscape is so different. Um, yes, I think I've gone completely off topic from
It's
what
No,
we
that's
were
okay.
fine.
talking
Well,
about,
I was
but
going to say, yeah,
tangents.
yeah. It's weird how things stick with you with things. Because I remember, this is probably totally off topic, but it's just cropped into my head when you've mentioned that. I remember reading Riders years ago, probably way too young for what I was, and
Hmm.
yeah, no, nothing to her. It was written at the time, it worked. But I remember reading about the one character, and she's like, "Oh my God, she was a massive elephantine woman at 11 stone," and I was a bigger kid, and reading that, it just kind
11
of
stone. I'm like,
yeah,
oh,
11 stone. And it was like, oh my God, I've just, yeah, what the hell's
Yeah.
going to happen to me in the world? And just, yeah,
Mm.
these things stick and just still,
they really do. Although I really liked they adapted Rivals, which is the second book in that
yes,
series
Yeah.
on Disney
yes,
Plus,
yes,
and they dealt with like it was brilliant, vaguely obsessed. But also, what I really liked about it is, although it's half glamorized the 80s, it then also peeled back a
yeah,
lot and did and made us face the racism, the fat phobia, the
Yeah.
misogyny. Like you see it
Mm.
on screen, and they don't hide from that. I think they did that in a way that worked very, very well.
Mm.
yeah. Yeah, I've seen
R-
some things about George Michael as well. When again, really off topic now. Yeah, really peeling back how the papers were in the 80s, and it's yeah, it's good to see that this is happening now. And
Yeah, definitely. You need these
Definitely.
things so that uh, while it's lovely for there to be um stuff that's just like safe spaces, like
Yeah.
within books, if you've just got like completely new fantasy worlds that don't even mention that it's a different thing to mainstream for there to be gay couples and things
Yeah,
like
because
that.
that's what it's like in Winter's Orbit, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just the norm. And it feels very much like that in the Vanishers Palace too.
Yes.
mm,
Um,
In fact, this was the first book I ever read that had they them pronouns in.
yeah.
And
There's
I read it and I got a bit confused and I had to go and I went back and then I looked it up and I was like, oh, okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah,
And off I
yeah,
went.
that's it, isn't it? But you do have to kind of also have, on the flip side, not erasing the
Yes.
problems that there have been. So,
Yes.
and because otherwise there's no learning there. That's kind of
Yes.
what we're getting, isn't it, Jess, with like
yeah,
the kids at school and the text they're reading, and there's like quite a argument between whether they should be reading them because of stuff that's in them, or or they should because it allows them to engage and confront the things that are in it and how
Yeah.
it's different,
Which
hopefully.
I think is really important. Like, people talk about problematic faves. Now, there are some problematic faves which you need to possibly re-examine what you're reading. Full
Hmm.
out racist characters who
Yeah.
are, you know, pictured as the hero and heroine. No, unacceptable. Um, Reading older texts at school, I think, is really interesting because then you go, okay, well, what is wrong about this? What
Yeah.
is it demonstrating? Um,
Mm.
yeah. God, flashbacks to like being an English teacher in a school and in an academy in South London. I'm just like, no, no, too much trauma,
Yeah.
too much
yeah,
trauma.
I bet.
yeah. I wouldn't
um
even want to.
Yeah, I was a kid in a school in Southeast London, so I know how terrifying that landscape
Oh, I
is.
was at Harris Academy. Like that was. I mean, I loved the students, but it was not good for a little anxious soul like mine.
Yeah, yeah. You do have to be brave to deal with
Yeah.
kids, definitely.
Oh God, Jenny.
Yeah, before we diverse too far,
But yeah, before we're talking about
we
saving the
do go
world.
off. Um, yeah, so we love the secondary characters. We were
Mm.
talking a bit about that, about like
Yep,
your
yep.
own
In your book.
book and how they're there. And this one has a great mix of them as well. Do you have a favorite, and why have you picked them?
I really like Lien and Thong, who are
Mm,
the children.
yeah.
Children. Because I think they're really interesting. I think the way that they relate to each other, the way that they relate to Yen and to Wukong is really interesting. But also it does what all good secondary characters should do, which is they exist as their own thing, but also they provide growth and narrative arcs for the main characters as well.
Hmm.
Like just having a ton of people in the background is nice, but that feels like window dressing.
Hmm.
You want to have characters who are fully fleshed, who these two definitely are, but also who engage with the main characters in the romance in a way that helps us learn about them and see different sides to them. The way Wukong is with the children is very different to how she is with everyone else, which is really
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely.
Yeah, when so yeah, me and Emma sort of we mill around and ask the questions, and it was like I was like writing this question, I'm like favorite secondary characters, who is it and why is it the twins? It's kind of that was just going
Why
around in
is
my
it the
head.
twins? Yeah.
So I love the others, but yeah, that was kind of in my head when
Oh,
I
I
was
love her
writing it.
mother though. I found
Yes,
her
Yes.
like she's such a strong character. They are all really interesting, like you're saying, in the
Yeah.
role that they play within it. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but one of the elders,
yes, the
Jiang,
elder.
who is they seem to have their own growth as well, like
Yes.
their own arc. You think they're one thing when they're in it at the beginning, but like you see their moral standpoint, and then they're following through on that, and so yeah, there is a lot
It's
there. Yeah.
really interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love this book so much.
Well, I was going to say that kind of perfectly leads into the next question.
Yes.
So I think me and Emma are both the same on this. This is the first dip into Vietnamese culture. And
Mm.
after reading the book, I kind of went and delved deeper into it about intimacy, language, and the gender expression within the books and the world. Was it your first experience too, or are
So
there
I'm trying to
more?
remember whether this was the first one I read of hers or whether it was a different book in the Zoya universe. So she has the Zoya universe, which is a mix of both romances and space operas,
Hmm.
which is really cool. So one of the romances, there's a fireborn of exile, and De Bodard refers to it as a drama llama and wallflower romance, which is really cute.
Okay.
And there's one with like a sentient spaceship falling in love with a nerdy engineer. Like it's really, really, really cool. And that wider universe, there's one called the Tea Master and the Detective, which is like a retelling of Holmes and Watson, but
Oh,
queer
okay.
Ah,
with
Yeah.
like
nice.
with like a sentient spaceship, and it's so cool. And she does a lot. So De Bodard is French Vietnamese, and a lot of Vietnamese narratives that we see in Western culture are American Vietnamese. So
Mm.
you have Helen Huang, who wrote The Kiss Quotient and that trilogy, and there are two, Trinity Nguyen and Loan Lee, who've written YA contemporaries. So there's A Faux Love Story, which is Loan Lee, and A Ban Me for Two by Trinity Nguyen, which is sort of YA. But De Bodard has a different take on it, not writing from an American Vietnamese standpoint, which I
Mm.
find really interesting. And she has a couple of others. There's Fireheart Tiger, which is sapphic but set in pre-colonial, an alternate pre-colonial Vietnam.
Okay.
And Dragons and Blades is set in sort of an alternate 19th century Vietnamese court. And a lot of the time, what she's doing is looking at this idea of what happens if colonialism hadn't impacted Vietnam in the way that it has. How could things be different? What would be different? And then exploring that and the naturalization and the centering of that kind of very explicitly Vietnamese experience is something that I just adore in her book. So it's
Mm.
just brilliant. It's completely different. And I think it's really important to read things that are different from our own experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think it was before you got here, me and Emma were chatting about like a romance spiral that you read a book and then you just fall into this twist of going deeper into what the meanings are and what has been brought up in it. And it's just this beautiful place that you find yourself in with these perfect fruits hanging from the trees of like, I'll try a bit of this one and a bit of this one. And oh, yeah, romance just gives that
Gorgeous.
to you on a plate every time.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just delicious. I love it.
It is, and I think it's kind of linking back to our other interview with you before when we were
Mm.
talking about like what you can do to help support reading, more diversity and stuff, is that if you intentionally go out and try and find something that is different from what you usually read, you will automatically, like Jess is saying, you'll automatically go on a spiral and you find more books.
Yeah.
Like people go, like even with something like, oh, there's no closed door of romanticity, and it's like, No, rubbish. There is. You
There's
just
Yeah.
need to
tons.
intentionally find one,
I mean,
and then you'll
Legends and
find all the
Lattes.
others.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Legends and
Oh,
Lattes is a
exactly.
closed
yes.
door romantasy, and it's
Yes,
brilliant.
that's it. So it's just like it is hard sometimes because you're in your little bubble, but you just have to try and think to look outside of it.
Yeah, I mean, people talk a lot about, oh, where are authors of color or black authors or queer authors writing these
Mm,
things? They have always been there. It's just that they weren't picked up by traditional publishing. And even now, with more diversity in publishing, you're still going to find the best recommendations in reader and author spaces where you
yeah.
find an author and read the acknowledgements. Look at the
Yeah.
other authors that they are writing
Yeah,
with and
yeah.
they are talking to, and then follow that, and you'll find your reading list sort of diversifies.
And influencers too. Like if you look on BookTok and you find influence, like follow them, and then you'll get all of these different recommendations that you won't find on, like
It's
just a mainstream.
when I started writing, I was writing some MF and some FF, kind of a mix of the two. And over the last sort of year, I've made the shift to go fully sapphic because I was
Mm.
still writing mixed pairings under my Ellie Rose pen name. Um, And what has been really fascinating is the knock-on effect that has had on my Instagram. Now, Instagram only ever recommends other sapphic readers, writers, or influencers to me to
Right.
follow.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
like my entire For You page on TikTok has become super, super sapphic. Now
Yeah.
that I intentionally go and follow authors of color when they come up as well, because I want to read intersectionally disabled
Hmm.
authors, neurodiverse authors. I am interested in sapphic, non-binary, and trans voices in particular, but the way that everything is curated is really fascinating, and it will push white creators to the forefront every single time. And people
Mm.
go, well, there aren't black authors who are doing this. And I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
let me give
Yeah,
you a
really are.
list of all
Yeah,
the black
yeah.
authors who are doing
That's
this.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll say we found with the TikTok ban that, no offense to Americans if they're
No.
out there, but yeah, it just became very Commonwealth that as soon as they were gone for sort of like a few hours, I got so many Australians and Canadians. It's like, oh my God, where the hell were you people before?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Mm.
And yeah, you get lost in the for you and the swipe. You need to just that little bit deeper, and it just
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
out at you.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
exactly.
But we are glad that
Um,
you're back, people. It's all good.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Um, so yeah, we can't help but ask about the palace and yeah, it's mentioned obviously in the title, the Vanishers Palace, and it was described like so magnificently. So yeah, what were your thoughts about it? How did
Hey,
yeah.
I did some
Okay.
research on this
Okay.
because one of the things I really like about Aliette De Bodard is on their website they use AO3 tags to describe
Okay.
things about the books. And one of the things they use is the term a non-Euclidean geometry palace. All
Wow.
right, so
Okay.
here we are. So Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry is basically interested in parallel lines and how parallel lines work. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so Euclidean parallel lines kind of work like this, just work in parallel as we imagine them to. Non-Euclidean do not. So you've got hyperbolic, which kind of looks like a semicircle. So they kind of go start here, go no, like that like that. So they start out and come in and then go back out again. And then ellipti kind of lean away. So they start here and do like almost like a cyclical. But in both of those, basically it's this idea that those are parallel lines. So
Yeah.
then how you experience everything, how you experience space, how you experience time is all on this slightly weird, distorted version to how we experience it here. And that's what she does in the Paris Palace. And that's why Yen, when she first turns up, like feels a bit sick and doesn't
Yeah.
feel very well
Yes.
because she's suddenly dealing with this non-Euclidean geometry that she has
Mm.
never dealt with on Earth. And I think that's just, I mean, I had to go look up all the details because I was like, I do not know enough maths to be able to do this off the
This
top
is
of my
it.
head.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just
Maths is not my
fascinating.
thing. My partner could speak about that kind of thing. He goes into quantum physics and all of
Yes.
that. And
God.
I'm like, he likes to tell me about it. And I just sit there like, Okay. I don't know.
Okay.
My
Yeah, it's
brain
going
only goes so far, I'm
yeah, it's going
afraid.
back into it that the amount of doors these things
Mm.
open. Because yeah, I've been learning about Vor recently about kind of the consumption of things,
Mm.
which has the sentient buildings, and yeah, just I never would have fallen upon that other than just picking up
Yeah.
these books and going, okay, what does this mean? And then yeah, I'm
See, my
lost.
brain went to Labyrinth with the staircase
Oh,
that
Yeah,
she
just
gets
yes.
stuck on, and the baby's down there, and she's like, "How do I get there?" And it's all up. Yeah, it's so unique and very different from a lot of other beast
Yeah.
palaces or
yes, yes.
castles or stuff.
Which I
Yeah,
really liked. And I like the fact that also it's not just described as, oh, distance is a bit wonky here. Like
yeah,
this is an explicit, like this is a non-Euclidean geometry palace. Like that
yes,
is such a nerd thing, and I
mm-hmm,
appreciate it so much.
yes.
Works into the next question with the magic. So,
Mm.
magic, it was very, very unique in this with the prose and everything flowing through it. And we're used to seeing sort of a lot of explanations with magic in books before how they work and the mechanics of it. What do you think the choices for the magic and the technology brought to the story in this book?
I think it, I think in some ways it sort of I love this word, discombobulates the reader
Mhm.
because you kind of identify with Yen. She's the character that you meet at the beginning. She's the first character you meet. And then as you go through, you are experiencing everything with her at the same time. You're exploring this world at the same time. And I think not going into great detail of this is how magic works. Um, which to be fair, most books don't do it in quite that in
Yeah,
quite
Yeah.
that tone of voice. But I think it fit with the theme of the book and it fit with the style and the confusion that Yen is going through. Like I almost didn't want to know how it all worked exactly. I kind of like the fact that you feel slightly lost. This book feels a little bit like you're in like it's gonna sound weird. You're in a warm bath. Like you get into the bath and you're kind of submerged in something that feels really quite different in the way maybe that probably partly to do with like the ideas of intimacy and how that works, but also this world is so different and you don't get an adjustment time. You just
mm,
get funk, there you go. And
yeah,
everything you understand is through Yen's perspective. So you start by thinking one thing about magic. And then as the book develops and she experiences other things, her opinions change and your opinions change. And I thought it's just beautifully done. Like it's that there is, I meant to quote it earlier, there's like this moment where she's kissing Vukon and she is the one who kisses Vukon. Like in all those Beauty and the Beast things, you're like, oh,
yeah,
like captor, captor. No, she kisses Vukon, and there's this moment where she goes, she pulled Vukon close again, letting those lips engulf her, sealing all words away. She was lost, drowning beneath murky waters, lungs filled with brine and algae and oil, wanting only that coldness to fill her, to transfigure her. And that's kind of how I feel about this book. Like you just kind of let it seep into your bones a little
mm.
bit and sort of live it. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. It's kind of got like more that feel of like magical realism in
Yes.
that but it isn't quite because obviously there is scientific side to it as well as the fantasy
Yeah.
side and stuff. But yeah,
And the
it
blurring
you've
of the
just
two is nice, like having the
yeah,
science with the magic. I really like. I really
because
like
there's
that.
there's a blurring between magic and technology in the Vanishers who came before and what they have, but then also obviously Wukong has her own magic as well, and like you say, it's not really explicitly said what is this and what is that, but it's there and there's just all this mix of it and
Yes,
yeah, like Yen, you're like, well, what's going on? Why is
Yeah.
this happening? You know? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gorgeous. Love it. All
Yes.
encompassing. Probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for recommending this book and coming to talk to us now and before about your Nix and Tell.
Thanks for
Um,
having me. It's been great. I've
yeah,
had so much fun.
it's been
Yes,
brilliant. I
us
feel
too.
like
Yes.
we could definitely talk for a long,
Yeah,
long
keep
time off
going.
on other topics.
I mean, we could do an entire episode on wrestling alone.
Yes,
Like we discovered this in the
you and
Yes, we
Jess,
did.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
That-
season
Look
9.
out for that one. The
Bring the
special will
smackdown.
summer special will be yeah, and
We'll
me
do a
just sitting there
SummerSlam
going,
episode.
Yes.
yes, I'm very
Emma's
excited.
just
I'm gonna have to like give it a go and give you my novice take. I will be like Yen with wrestling.
yeah, yeah.
You know?
We're submerging you in slowly.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so our next topic is our next episode is our topic of the month, which is audiobooks for this month. And yeah, thank you again.
Thanks so
Hope
much.
everyone enjoys.